My fiancé said, "My mom is moving in permanently. If you don't like it, leave." The words didn't just land, they detonated. 1 second, I was stirring pasta sauce, tasting it off the wooden spoon, thinking about whether we had enough parmesan for dinner. The next, I was staring at the man I planned to marry, realizing he had just drawn a line through the center of our life together and placed me firmly on the outside. He said it so casually, too, as if he were discussing the weather, as if the sentence wasn't fundamentally about my home, my stability, my boundaries. I remember the way the light hit his face, warm, soft, almost gentle, a terrible contrast to what he'd just said. Outside, the last bit of sunset bled through the window, turning the countertops gold. Inside, everything in me went still. My first instinct was disbelief. My second was the sharp, cold understanding that he meant every word. He leaned back on the stool, arms crossed, like he was the reasonable one. Like his mother moving into my home indefinitely, without discussion, was some inevitable fact of life I simply needed to accept. A strange calm washed over me. Not numb, not frozen, but precise. The kind of clarity people describe in stories where time slows right before a crash. I set the spoon down. "Are you serious?" I asked. He didn't blink. "Dead serious. She needs a place to live, and this is her home now too. If that's a problem for you, you know your options." Your options, not our options, not our conversation, your options. That was the moment I realized something vital. He wasn't choosing between us. He had already chosen. But he didn't understand something just as vital. This house had never been his to make decisions about. So I exhaled once, steady and controlled. "Okay," I said. And in that moment, he truly thought he'd won. He had no idea the ground beneath him had already started to crumble. People always assume relationships fall apart in one explosive moment. One sentence sharp enough to split a life in half. But the truth is quieter than that. It starts with small concessions, tiny hesitations you swallow, instincts you silence because you want the relationship to work. When I met my fiancé 3 years ago, everything felt easy. He was warm, charming, funny, in that effortless way that makes you think you finally exhaled after holding your breath for years. We built our relationship slowly. Movie nights, weekend trips, soft mornings where his head rested on my shoulder like it belonged there. I believed we were steady, safe, building something real. When we decided to move in together, it wasn't some dramatic milestone. It felt natural. We were ready, or at least I thought we were. My best friend, my bestie since middle school, knew her dad had a few rental properties. She mentioned we were looking for a place, and he offered one immediately. He'd known me since I was 12, trusted me, and gave us a great deal. He handled most of the logistics, emailing me the paperwork because I was the one he had a relationship with. When he asked whose name should go on the lease, the answer was obvious: mine. That was how things had always worked with him. And my fiancé? He didn't ask to see the documents. He didn't ask to sign anything. He didn't even pretend to care about the details. "Paperwork stresses me out," he'd said, waving a hand. "You're better at this stuff anyway. Just tell me where to send my half of the rent." So I paid the first month and the security deposit, $4,200 from my savings. After that, we split rent evenly, but the lease remained solely in my name because that was how his dad had drafted it. My fiancé never questioned it. Not once. He simply assumed things were fair because I was handling them. He assumed the house was ours because it felt like it. He assumed he had rights he never legally possessed. But at the time, I interpreted all of that as trust, not irresponsibility. Love can make irresponsibility look harmless. His mother, though, she was a different story from the very beginning. She swept into our relationship like a cold wind through an open door. Weekly dinners were mandatory. Sundays belonged to her, always. She critiqued everything about me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. My hair, my cooking, my work hours, even how I rinsed dishes. "That's not how I taught my son," she'd say. "Sweetie, you should try doing it this way." She means well, my fiancé always insisted. But meaning well didn't change the sting. Still, I tried. I told myself this was what blending families look like, that once we got married, things would settle, that she would soften, that he would learn to set boundaries. But the truth was there, hiding in the seams, a pattern where her comfort came before mine, where he minimized my feelings to avoid upsetting her, where I adjusted myself over and over because loving him felt worth it. What I didn't realize was how close everything was to tipping, how heavy all those little compromises had become, how silently resentment was collecting around us, waiting. Until the night he told me to leave, and all of it, every ignored red flag, every small sacrifice, finally snapped into focus. The unraveling didn't happen in one blow. It began with a shift so subtle I almost didn't notice it at first. 3 weeks before everything collapsed, my fiancé came home from visiting his mother with a strange, brittle energy. Not angry, just tightly wound, like he was rehearsing something in his head. I was at the stove stirring vegetables when I felt him behind me, silent, too silent. "You okay?" I asked, glancing over my shoulder. He didn't answer. He just sat at the counter, elbows on the surface, eyes fixed on me with an expression I couldn't read. 5 full minutes passed before he finally spoke. "We need to talk." Those 4 words never mean anything good. He told me his mother's landlord had sold her building. New management, no lease renewals, renovations coming. She had 60 days to move. I genuinely felt bad for her. Housing instability is terrifying, especially for someone older and on a fixed income. "That's rough," I said, meaning it. "Is she looking at apartments nearby?" He hesitated, and that hesitation planted the first real seed of dread in my stomach. "Actually, I told her she could move in here." My spoon froze mid-stir. "You. What?" "Just temporarily," he said quickly, "until she finds something." An attempt at softening the blow. It didn't work. "You told her she could move in without asking me?" "It's my mom," he said, like that was a magic excuse. "She's family. I didn't think I needed permission to help her." Permission. That word sank like a stone inside me. I kept my voice measured. "Okay, how long are we talking? A month? 2? He didn't look at me. "I don't know. She's on a fixed income. Finding something affordable could take a while." "Define a while." "Maybe permanently." The air seemed to solidify. I couldn't breathe for a second. "Permanently?" My voice came out thin. "Your mother living with us forever?" "She's getting older," he said. "She shouldn't be alone, and this house has 3 bedrooms. We're not using the guest room." "That's my home office." "You can work in the living room," he replied, dismissive, like it didn't matter. Something clicked painfully inside me. I had spent years avoiding conflict with his mother, adjusting, compromising, swallowing things to keep peace. And now he not only assumed I'd accept her moving in, he assumed my needs were irrelevant. It wasn't just a decision, it was a declaration. "I'm not comfortable with this," I said slowly. "We need to talk about it." "There's nothing to talk about," he snapped back. "She's moving in next weekend." "Next weekend? You already set a date?" "She needs to start packing." "But you could leave me hanging, make a major life decision without consulting me." His jaw tightened. "This is my house too. My mom, my decision." "No," I said, a tremor running through my hands. "This is our house, our life, our decision. That's how partnerships work." He stood then, shoulders squared, eyes cold in a way I had never seen. "Fine," he said. "Then here it is. My mom is moving in. If you don't like it, maybe you should leave." For a moment, everything in the room went silent, except the pounding of my heart. "You're choosing your mother over me," I whispered. "I'm choosing family. She was here before you. She'll be here after you." The words sliced through me. Clean, devastating, final. And that was when the seed fully cracked open. Because something else shifted inside me too. Clarity. Cold, steady, irreversible clarity. "Okay," I said. He didn't know what that okay meant. Not yet. But the countdown had already started. The night he told me to leave didn't happen in some dramatic explosion. It unfolded in a quiet, almost eerie stillness. The kind that makes every word feel sharper, every breath louder, every second longer than it should be. After he threw down the ultimatum, I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I didn't beg him to reconsider. I simply said, "Okay." What he didn't understand was that okay wasn't surrender. It was a door closing. He stared at me, confusion flickering across his face, like he had expected a fight, like he had expected me to cling, like he believed he had enough power to make me bend. "Okay, what?" he asked. "Okay, I'll leave." His eyes widened, not with regret, but with disbelief, as if I'd broken a script he had written in his head. "I mean it," I said. "You told me if I didn't like it, I should leave, so I will." He swallowed. "Wait, don't be dramatic. You're overreacting." Overreacting. A word men use when they expect women to absorb the damage quietly. But I didn't respond. I didn't argue. I didn't give him a chance to twist the narrative. I went to our bedroom, shut the door behind me, and took out my laptop with hands that were steady in a way that surprised even me. Years of quiet compromises had boiled away into something clean. Clarity. I texted my best friend, "Need to talk. Urgent." She called me within seconds. "What happened?" she asked. I told her everything. His mother moving in permanently, his dismissal of my feelings, the ultimatum he'd delivered. Like our relationship was a casual rental agreement he could renegotiate at will. By the time I finished, she had already looped in her dad. Her dad, the landlord. The only name on the lease? Mine. She wants to terminate early, my best friend said to him. Can you help? Of course, he replied without hesitation, especially if her fiancé thinks he gets to make decisions about my property. There it was, the first real crack of power shifting. That same night, I sent a formal email requesting early termination of the lease due to irreconcilable differences regarding the living situation. He responded within an hour. Request approved. No early termination fee. Effective in 30 days. And that was it. Because I was the only legal tenant, the lease didn't transfer. It didn't continue. It didn't magically become shared because my fiancé believed it was. It simply ended. He had no legal right to stay. No claim to the house. No standing. The next morning, my friend's dad, calm, professional, and absolutely done with the entitlement, hand-delivered a 30-day notice to vacate to the home my fiancé thought was his. I wasn't there when he opened the door, but I can imagine it. His confusion, his shock, the offended righteousness of someone who had never read a single document he'd been living under. The fallout was immediate. My phone lit up with messages, each one more frantic than the last. What is this? Did you seriously get me evicted? This is my house. I ignored every message, screenshotted them, saved them. Documentation. 20 minutes later, he called. I let it ring. He called again and again. Finally, I picked up. What did you do? He shouted. Are you insane? I terminated my lease, I said calmly. Your lease? This is our lease? No, I replied. It's my lease. You never signed anything. Your name isn't on a single document. Silence. The silence of a man realizing, for the first time, that assumptions aren't legally binding. This is crazy, he finally said. You can't just throw me out. I'm not throwing you out. The lease ended. I'm leaving. You have no lease to stay under. And where am I supposed to go? He demanded. I didn't flinch. Ask your mother, I said. She seems to be very involved in your living arrangements. I could almost hear the way his breath caught on the other end of the line. For once, he had no script ready. The next hours were chaos. Calls from his mother, calls from his sister, texts full of insults, guilt trips, accusations. But none of it mattered, because the inciting incident wasn't his ultimatum. It wasn't even the eviction. It was the moment I realized something simple and devastating. I had been giving him power he never actually had, and I had finally taken it back. The hours after the eviction notice felt unreal, like I was floating inside someone else's life. I sat on my best friend's couch, knees pulled to my chest, watching the notifications stack on my phone like falling debris. Missed calls, voicemails, texts from him, from his mom, from his sister, each one a different weapon disguised as communication. My ex-fiancé's messages came first, rapid fire. You blindsided me. This is insane. You're ruining everything. We were supposed to get married. I didn't answer. I refused to be dragged into a debate about consequences he himself had triggered. Then the tone shifted. Can we please just talk? You didn't have to do this. I thought we were a team. Funny how "we're a team" only mattered once the ground beneath him started shaking. I set the phone face down and breathed slowly until the tightness in my chest eased. My best friend sat next to me, silent, giving me space but not distance. Are you okay? She asked quietly. I nodded, though I wasn't entirely sure. I felt steady and shaken at the same time, like a tree standing upright after a storm but still trembling from the wind. A knock at the door made both of us jump. Her dad stepped inside, holding a folder, the official lease termination paperwork. It's done, he said gently. Legally, you're clear. You won't be held responsible for anything after the 30 days. Something inside me loosened. Relief, gratitude, maybe even grief. Thank you, I whispered. He gave me a sad smile. For what it's worth, you're making the right call. Ultimatums in relationships rarely go well. Ultimatums involving someone else's property? He exhaled. Never. I almost laughed at that, but the sound stuck in my throat. Then came the text from his mother. The words hit with venom. You vindictive little witch, how dare you do this to my son? He gave you everything. You're ungrateful. I always knew you weren't good enough for him. Each message was a reminder of the exact dynamic that had quietly eroded our relationship. Her entitlement, her belief that I was a guest in my own life, her conviction that her son's happiness should eclipse mine entirely. My best friend peeked at the screen. Wow, she really said that? I nodded and screenshot everything. Evidence matters. Hours passed. The sun dipped low. I thought maybe the worst was over. I was wrong. Around 7 p.m., my ex showed up at my best friend's apartment building. He didn't text beforehand. He didn't ask permission. He just came, banging on the door hard enough to make the frame rattle. "I know you're in there," he shouted. "We need to talk." My breath hitched. My best friend's dad moved closer to the door, arms crossed, voice calm but firm. "Son, you need to step back. This has nothing to do with you," my ex snapped. "It has everything to do with me," he said. "I'm the landlord. You are not on the lease, and right now you are inches away from trespassing." My ex's face contorted through a dozen emotions: anger, fear, disbelief, before settling on desperation. "Please," he said, eyes darting past him toward me. "Please, just talk to me." I stepped forward, but only enough so he could see my expression clearly. "There's nothing to talk about," I said softly. "I didn't mean what I said," he insisted. "I wasn't thinking straight. My mom, she was pressuring me. I panicked." "You told me to leave," I replied. "And you meant it. You just didn't expect me to actually do it." His voice cracked. "This doesn't have to end. I'll tell her not to move in. I'll fix everything." And for a brief second, I looked at him, really looked at him. The man I had loved, the man I was once ready to marry, the man who had always, always chosen the path of least resistance, even when that path cut directly through me. No part of me felt tempted, not anymore. "I'm done," I said. His shoulders slumped. "Please don't do this." "You did this," I whispered. "I'm just finishing it." My friend's dad closed the door gently but firmly, leaving my ex standing alone in the hallway. The reaction wasn't a breakdown. It wasn't screaming. It wasn't emotional chaos. It was quiet, steady, a final understanding settling into my bones. I had trusted a man who never learned how to stand beside me. And now, for the first time in years, I was standing on my own. I thought the worst was behind me after the confrontation at my best friend's apartment, but endings rarely arrive cleanly. When people lose control over a situation they once believed they owned, they don't let go quietly. They claw, they grasp, they scramble. And that's exactly what the next 2 weeks became: a slow, relentless unraveling of entitlement, denial, and desperation. The first escalation came from his mother. Apparently, she decided to bypass me entirely and go straight to the source of her outrage: my best friend's dad, the landlord. She called his office the next morning, her voice drenched with false politeness at first. "Surely we can work something out," she said. "My son has been a good tenant." "He was never a tenant," he replied matter-of-factly. "He was an approved occupant under someone else's lease." "Well," she said, bristling, "can't you just put the lease in his name now?" "No." "Why not?" "Because I don't want to," he said, "and because the property is already lined up for different tenants." "This is discrimination," she hissed. "It's property ownership," he responded, unfazed. "And this conversation is over." She called him 3 more times that day. The 4th time, he warned her that any further contact would be considered harassment. He told me all of this later that evening, shaking his head in disbelief. "She's relentless," he muttered. "Always has been," I sighed. But that was only round 1. My ex picked up the baton next. The guilt texts began pouring in around 2 a.m. every night. I'd wake up to paragraphs of emotional manipulation. "I gave you 3 years. I was going to marry you. How can you throw us away over one argument? You're punishing me because I love my mother. You're abandoning someone who chose you." I didn't respond to a single message. Silence was my only defense. Silence. And screenshots. A few days later, his sister called me from an unknown number. "Please don't hang up," she said when I answered. I want to understand what happened." "Your brother told me to leave," I said. "So I'm leaving." "But the house wasn't his." "Correct." "And he really said that? That you should go?" "Yes." She exhaled, long and shaky. "He's a mess. He's staying with me, and he won't talk. He just sits there staring at the wall." "That sounds like a him problem," I said before I could stop myself. "How can you be so cold?" she whispered. I paused, choosing my words carefully. "Your brother chose his mother over me. He gave me an ultimatum without discussion. He acted like my boundaries didn't matter. I'm not being cold. I'm enforcing the consequences of his choices." She didn't know what to say, because there was nothing to say. Still, the real escalation came 2 weeks in, when I had to return to the house to collect my belongings. My stomach tightened the moment we pulled into the driveway. My best friend's dad came with me, along with 2 men he trusted, acting as witnesses and a buffer in case things turned hostile. The air felt heavy, as if the house itself was bracing for conflict. My ex was waiting inside, and so was his mother. You've got some nerve showing up here, she spat the moment I walked in. I didn't even flinch. I'm here to get my things. You ruined my son's life, she screamed. No, I said calmly. Your son ruined his own life when he told me to leave. He tried to intervene. Can we not do this right now? You started this, I replied. I'm just finishing it. I walked past them and headed toward the bedroom. My ex stepped aside, but not far. His mother hovered behind him like a shadow. My home office, my sanctuary, was already filled with her boxes. She'd begun claiming the space as if the eviction notice didn't exist. Kitchen items I had bought were stacked on the counter. Artwork I'd chosen was leaning against the wall. The whole place felt stripped of neutrality, overtaken by their chaos. You're not taking the TV, my ex snapped suddenly. I bought it with our money. With my money, I corrected. I have the receipt. We were together. Everything was shared. We weren't married, I said. And even if we were, you still don't get to rewrite reality. That TV is mine. His mother scoffed. You're stealing from him. Ma'am, my best friend's dad said sharply, I'd suggest you stop talking before you say something actionable. Then came the moment everything shifted. I reached my jewelry box, and it was empty. A cold ripple ran through me. Where's my jewelry? I asked. What jewelry? My ex said, avoiding my eyes. My grandmother's earrings, my mother's necklace, the pieces that were in this box. I don't know what you're talking about, he said too quickly. His mother appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. Maybe you should have thought about your precious jewelry before you made my son homeless. My stomach dropped. You took them, I said quietly. She smirked. I didn't take anything, but if something's missing, well, karma's a funny thing. My best friend's dad was already pulling out his phone. Yes, I'd like to report a theft. Suddenly, everything shifted. My ex panicked. Wait, let's not be dramatic. Where are my things? He swallowed. My mom took them for safekeeping. So you did take them? We were keeping them safe, he insisted. She was worried you'd lie and say I stole them. His mother snapped. Why should I give them back after what you've done? Because it's theft, the landlord said, and the police are on their way. Her face went pale. She disappeared into the bedroom and returned with a small bag. All there, she muttered. I checked. The items were intact, but the betrayal left a scar deeper than any missing object could have. The police arrived anyway. A report was filed. Documentation. Always documentation. As I loaded the last box into the car, my ex made one final attempt. We can fix this, he pleaded. I'll make my mom move out. We'll start fresh. I shook my head. You told me to leave, I said, and you meant it. I was angry. No, I said softly. You were honest. For the first time, maybe. His eyes shone with something like regret, but it was too late. The moment had passed. The fallout was already in motion, and I was finished carrying a relationship that only held weight on one side. Leaving that house for the final time should have felt empowering. In movies, that's the moment the heroine straightens her spine, walks into the sunset, and never looks back. But real life is heavier than film. Real life lingers. When the door clicked shut behind me, something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with a quiet ache that spread through my chest like bruising. I sat in the passenger seat of my best friend's dad's truck, surrounded by my boxes, and for the first time since everything began, the adrenaline drained out completely, and the grief came rushing in. Grief for the relationship I thought I had. Grief for the future I had imagined so vividly that it felt like a half-built home inside my mind. Grief for the version of myself who had tried so hard for 3 years to make things work. My best friend placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. You okay? I nodded because I didn't trust my voice, but the truth was complicated. I felt strong and hollow at once, like a building still standing after a fire but filled with smoke. When we arrived at her apartment, I carried my first box inside and set it on the floor. The moment it touched the ground, something in me shifted, an overwhelming sense of displacement. This wasn't my home. My home had been taken from me long before I packed a single box. It had happened in small cuts over years. Each dismissal from his mother, each time he minimized my feelings, each compromise I made alone. Now, standing in this cramped but safe space, surrounded by borrowed walls and borrowed time, the reality hit me. I had left a relationship, a house, and an entire imagined life behind. And even though it was the right choice, it hurt. That night, after my friend went to bed, I lay awake on her pull-out couch, staring at the ceiling. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car passing outside. My phone lit up again, another message from his sister. He's devastated. He hasn't eaten. He barely sleeps. Are you sure you want to end this? I closed my eyes. He was devastated because his plan fell apart, because the security he took for granted evaporated, because consequences had finally arrived. But the part she didn't see, the part she would never see, was the devastation I had already carried silently for years. For every Sunday call that lasted 2 hours, for every criticism from his mother that he never defended me against, for every moment I felt like a guest inside my own life. I turned the screen over. A new voicemail appeared. I didn't need to play it to know the tone. Broken, pleading, regretful. In all the ways people become when the fallout hits them harder than expected. Still, I pressed play. His voice came through, cracked and uneven. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. I don't want to lose you. Please just talk to me." A quiet sob escaped him, a sound I had heard only once before, the night his dog died. It shook me, but not in the way he wanted. It didn't pull me back toward him. It pushed me farther away. Because in that moment, I finally understood. He wasn't crying because he'd lost me. He was crying because he'd lost the life he expected me to keep holding together for him. The realization was sharp, painful, clarifying. I set the phone aside and curled under the blanket on the couch. My chest felt tight, and for the first time since everything happened, I cried. Not because I wanted him back, but because I was mourning the woman I had been with him. The woman who bent until she nearly broke. The woman who excused disrespect as stress. The woman who mistook endurance for love. Somewhere between trembling breaths, another truth emerged. Quiet, but unmistakable. I wasn't crying for the relationship. I was crying because I had finally walked away from it. And walking away, even when it's right, is still a death of something you once cherished. Later, when the tears dried, a different sensation settled in. Not peace, not yet, but a faint certainty. A spark of strength inside the exhaustion. I whispered it into the dark, more to myself than anyone. "You're finally free." And I was. Not healed, not whole, but free. The turning point didn't arrive as some triumphant moment of clarity. It came quietly, tucked inside ordinary minutes, like a tide shifting before you realize the water has moved. About a week after I had left the house, I received an unexpected text from his sister. "I think you should know. Mom stole your jewelry. It got around. People are talking." I stared at the message for a long moment, feeling something twist. Not hurt this time, but recognition. The truth was spreading, and not because I forced it, because their own actions were finally catching up to them. A beat later, another message came. "Everyone's saying you dodged a bullet." The words sank deep. Not because I needed validation, but because for the first time, someone in his family saw what I had lived through. Later that evening, my best friend handed me a mug of tea and said, "You know, people aren't looking at you like the villain anymore." I snorted. "I'm not sure they ever really understood the story in the first place." "No," she said gently, "but they're starting to." I didn't realize how much I had needed to hear that. Then came the final shift. 3 weeks after I'd moved out, the 30-day notice expired. The new tenants, a sweet couple expecting their first child, moved into the house that used to be mine. Seeing boxes through the open door, soft nursery blankets in pale neutral colors, the faint echo of laughter drifting into the yard. It hit harder than I expected. But it wasn't sadness. It was closure. My ex and his mother ended up in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town. His mother hated everything about it. The size, the noise, the lack of a yard. Mutual friends had a lot to say. She blames him for everything. Apparently she told him, if you'd kept her happy, we wouldn't be here. She refuses to move out. Says after everything she sacrificed, she deserves to live with him. The irony was almost poetic. He had chosen her, and now she was permanently his responsibility. Meanwhile, I had quietly been rebuilding. I signed a new lease on a small apartment, a place just for me. The landlord asked, "Anyone else on the lease?" I didn't hesitate. "No," I said, "just me." It felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I hadn't realized I'd lost. I bought used furniture over the weekend. Nothing extravagant. A soft couch that felt like a hug. A desk for my work. A lamp with warm light that made the space glow in the evenings. As I arranged things, a strange peace settled inside me. Not joy, not yet, but peace. The kind that comes from standing on ground that is wholly yours. Then, one night, another message arrived, from his sister again. "He's been asking about you. He wants to know if there's any chance you'd talk to him." I stared at the words without emotion. Not anger, not longing, just an empty sort of clarity. He hadn't learned anything. Not really. He was just afraid. afraid of the consequence he never saw coming, afraid of the life he now had to maintain without me. I typed a reply, then deleted it. Some conversations don't need to happen. Some doors remain closed because reopening them would serve no one, not even the person knocking. Instead, I put my phone down and looked around my new apartment. It wasn't large, it wasn't luxurious, but it was mine. Every angle of it reflected the simple truth that I hadn't been able to see while living under the shadow of his mother's influence and his complacency. I had mistaken endurance for love. I had mistaken sacrifice for partnership. I had mistaken proximity for connection. But here, in this small apartment, with quiet walls and my own breathing as the only sound, I felt something unfamiliar. Strength. Not the brittle strength of survival, the grounded strength of someone reclaiming their life after giving too much of it away. A turning point isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the moment you realize the world didn't end when you walked away. Sometimes it's the moment you understand, finally, fully, that leaving wasn't the collapse of your life. It was the beginning of it. Fallout is never immediate. It spreads, slow, inevitable, like ripples after a stone breaks the surface of a still lake. And the ripples from my decision reached farther than I expected. The 30-day notice expired, the new tenants moved in, and the place that once held my life now hummed with someone else's beginnings. I drove past it one afternoon just to see. A stroller sat by the doorway, soft curtains fluttered in the window, and laughter spilled out into the yard. It didn't hurt, it didn't sting, it felt finished. Meanwhile, my ex's fallout was only starting. Mutual friends began relaying pieces of stories. Small bits at first, then increasingly unfiltered as the weeks went on. He's working overtime. Can't keep up with bills. His mom hates the apartment, complains nonstop. She blames him for everything. She said, if you had kept her happy, we'd still be in that nice house. Every sentence was a bruise to the version of him I once loved, not because I wanted him back. Those feelings had burned out completely, but because it confirmed something I'd ignored for years. He was not built for consequence. He never had been. His mother's Social Security barely covered her share of expenses. He picked up the slack, stretched himself thin, and still couldn't keep up. The comfortable life he'd once enjoyed, built on equal rent splits, my savings, my stability, had evaporated. Reality had weight now, and he was carrying all of it. Through all of this, I stayed quiet. I didn't defend myself. I didn't gloat. I didn't respond to provocation. Because there was plenty of that. 2. His mother told anyone who would listen, she ruined my son's life. She's vindictive. She manipulated the system to evict him. But their story never held up under questioning. Didn't she pay the deposit? Wasn't the lease in her name? Didn't he tell her to leave first? Didn't your son's girlfriend's jewelry go missing? Then came the sentence that cracked their entire version of events. She took her grandmother's earrings? Seriously? Your son let her take them? You could feel the shift, slow, inevitable, truth settling like dust. Even people who once gave me side-eye began changing their tone. You dodged a bullet. Thank God you left. I can't believe you lived with that woman for 3 years. The jewelry incident became the turning point in everyone's eyes. But for me, the real turning point had come weeks earlier, when he told me to leave, and I finally believed him. I returned the engagement ring shortly after moving into my new place. I packaged it carefully, mailed it certified, kept the receipt. No drama, no theatrics, no message attached. He sent a single text afterward. Received. No apology, no acknowledgement, no reflection. Just a quiet confirmation that the chapter had closed. Meanwhile, I started rebuilding. My new apartment was modest, but it felt like oxygen after years of living under someone else's expectations. I bought furniture slowly, one piece at a time. A couch that didn't creak. A bed that felt like a promise of rest. A tiny dining table just big enough for me and maybe one friend. Every object was chosen intentionally. Every corner reflected a version of myself I'd forgotten. People told me I was starting over at 28, as if it were a tragedy. But the truth was far softer, far more hopeful. I wasn't starting over, I was simply starting. One morning, his sister texted me again. He's been asking about you, wants to know if you'd talk. I stared at the message for a long moment. There was no anger, no longing, no bitterness, only clarity. He wasn't reaching out because he loved me. He wasn't reaching out because he'd grown. He was reaching out because life had gotten harder than he expected and easier when I was there. I typed a brief reply. I wish him the best, but this chapter is closed. Then I deleted her number. A week later, while I was unpacking books, I caught my reflection in the window. Tired eyes, soft hair falling forward, my favorite worn sweater slipping off my shoulder. The woman looking back at me wasn't the same woman who had lived with him. She was steadier, clearer, more herself than she'd been in years. The fallout was still happening, for him, for his mother, for their new cramped apartment. But for me, fallout had become foundation. Something new, something mine, something strong. In the end, the story didn't end with a dramatic confrontation, a final screaming match, or some cinematic moment of revenge. It ended quietly, with a new lease signed in my name alone, a set of keys that belonged only to me, and a future I was finally free to shape without bending myself around someone else's expectations. People kept telling me I was starting from scratch at 28, as if that were something to be ashamed of. But standing in my new apartment, small, sunlit, imperfect, peaceful, I realized something that had taken me years to understand. Starting over isn't failing. Starting over is choosing yourself. When I placed a new lamp on my nightstand, when I built my desk, when I arranged my books along an empty shelf, each small act felt like reclaiming pieces of myself I had misplaced during those 3 years. The quiet became comforting. The space became mine. My life slowly started to feel like mine again. And the lesson was simple but sharp. Good memories don't excuse bad treatment. Love does not require shrinking. Compromise should never be a one-way street. My ex thought he could tell me to leave and still keep everything: the house, the control, the dynamic that benefited him at my expense. He thought love meant endurance. He thought I would bend because I always had. But love without respect isn't love. It's dependence. It's convenience. It's complacency. He chose his mother over me. He chose comfort over partnership. He chose the path of least resistance, and learned that sometimes the easiest choice becomes the hardest consequence. As for me, I didn't respond when he tried to reach out again. Some conversations don't need to happen. Some chapters don't need epilogues. Instead, I bought myself a small bouquet of flowers the day I moved the last box into my apartment. I set them in a glass jar on the kitchen counter and let myself breathe, a full, deep breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for years. Because the truth is, walking away wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of me. And if I ever forget that, all I have to do is look at the empty space beside my name on my new lease, the space where no one else's name belongs. Not anymore.